Welcome to Coffee in the Barn, where every cup tells a story. With a rotating lineup of hosts, we invite you to join us as we explore the diverse challenges and triumphs of modern life and the heart of agriculture. From the fields to the classroom, from innovators to everyday visionaries, each episode brings a fresh perspective and a new voice. So brew yourself a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's uncover the stories that shape our lives, our farms, and our communities.
Hey guys, and welcome back to this week's episode of Coffee in the Barn. This week we are happy to have Katie Dotterer. Katie is a third-generation dairy farmer from Pennsylvania who also works to foster an agricultural community of culturally conscious and respectful people through ongoing education within the ESL space, as well as sharing her stories across social media and through her world travels. Hi, Katie. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I know I've been following you for probably quite a few years on social media and have kind of been able to follow your story a little bit, but for those of our audience that don't know who you are, could you give us a little bit of an introduction on your background and kind of what you're doing today in your business?
Sure. Yeah. So I was a dairy farmer all my life, actually, up until just about 3 years ago. So I grew up as a third generation dairy farmer on my family dairy farm in central PA, which is still in operation to this day. And then I left in 2009 to start and co-own my own dairy farm as a first generation dairy farmer for 13 years. Wow. And the last 7 of those 13 years was a farm that we had purchased in Maryland. So like I said, 3 years ago, stepped away from it. Actually been like 3.5 years now. And I relocated to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So people often think that I went back to my family dairy. Not the case. I love history. I've always loved Gettysburg. So this just seemed like the best place to land. And so it was funny. I took what I had as a side hustle and turned it into my full-time career. So I kind of did all these like big things at once. Went through a divorce, and then I quit my full-time teaching job in the public school system. And I was like, well, it's either go big or go home. And I gave myself a year to see if this was going to work, and it did. And the opportunities just keep coming. And I'm very, very grateful to be where I'm at in life these days. So I still get to be in agriculture, just in a very different way, a way that I really didn't even think was possible, but here we are.
So besides jumping in and just kind of getting your feet wet and getting started, how did you kind of come up with your business plan and how you were going to create a career out of, I guess, a vision?
Yeah. So, like I said, this was a side hustle. So what I currently do is I create curriculum from scratch and then teach it. And it is specifically for agriculture. So I teach Spanish and I also teach English as a second language. So if you hear me refer to ESL, that's what that means. So it is literally their second language, or maybe their third or fourth or whatever, is English. So English is not their primary language like it is for you and I. I guess it started when I was a dairy farmer, and we always talked about the gap between farmers and the non-farming community, right? Farmers are less than 2% of the population in the US. And that's all well and good. And I did my part. I feel like, advocating for agriculture, still do when I get that opportunity. But I was witnessing a gap that we had within agriculture. And that was a culture gap and a language gap. And it bothered me because I also saw the Hispanic community being mistreated. And that is either, culturally wise, or like things from like wage disparities. I've been privy to, especially conversations in Facebook groups of, hey, what do you guys pay your Mexican workers versus your American workers? And it's like, this isn't okay, especially if those workers, let's say, have the same seniority, have been there the same amount of time, are doing the same job, have the same work experience. Like, they shouldn't be treated any different just because they speak a different language, because they have a different culture, things like that. So, and of course, the biggest thing is the communication barrier. that is huge for so many people. And, you know, when you're on a farm, I don't care what industry you're in, and we don't even have to talk about industry. Communication is important all around. But when you throw a barrier like Spanish or English in there, it makes things 10 times harder. So I'm just like, why are we not doing anything to address this? So I started this back in, 2017. And yeah, just started with dairy. And when other industries found out about it, I was approached. And like I said, I now have curriculum for poultry, for swine, and I am working on some other industry specific within agriculture courses. So that's how it got started, and that's where I'm at now. And I think a lot more people finally are waking up to the fact that, hey, if I want to have not only a successful business, but to be able to communicate, to be able to have good relationships with people, we need to meet in the middle. And that's the mission of what I do.
So are you having mostly employees of producers working with you, or are you having what level, managers, owners, kind of what does your class or the people that you work with, who does that look like?
All over the board. So I'm going to talk about my Spanish classes right now first. So again, people think that the Spanish classes are for people like you and I that speak English, that want to learn a little bit of Spanish. So my students are all adults. It's funny because I think a lot of people first think they're like, oh, she teaches kids. Yeah, I know, I used to do that. Like I did my time in the middle and high school. My students are adults. They are from California to Delaware to Canada. They are nationwide. I try to accommodate all the time zones. They are farmers. They are hoof trimmers. They're anywhere from the farm owner to milkers, anybody that's really communicating with people. I mean, I feel like you name it, I probably had somebody like milk tester. I've had nutritionists, and the growing sector that I've been having for my classes are veterinarians. And a couple years ago, I had asked, because it's very humbling, by the way, to have especially veterinarians, just because I'm like, y'all have all of this education.
Right.
I have some, but I don't have whatever it is, 7 to 10 years of vet school. And they said, because the first person to contact anymore when we go on a farm is usually not the farm owner. It is usually a Spanish speaker. And I need to know how to say, where is the sick cow? Can you help me with this surgery? Things like that. So my students are all over the board. And my ages range from 18 to 75. My oldest student, who is still with me to this day, he took both of my courses. I do a beginner's and an intermediate, and I've been tutoring him on the side for 2 years. He's 75. So when people come at me and they're like, I'm too old to learn a language, I'm like, that is no excuse.
That's awesome.
What's better than a great cup of coffee? A great coffee mug to match your personality while you listen to the next episode of Coffee in the Barn. At Buy Blackett, we've got mugs that'll make you laugh, smile, and show off your unique style, all while keeping your coffee warm. Whether you're into heartwarming messages or hilarious designs, there's something for everyone. Plus, every purchase supports Coffee in the Barn and helps us keep bringing you the content you love. So grab your next favorite mug today. Visit buyblackett.com/animistic and use the promo code animistic for exclusive deals. Let's type that out because there's 2 T's in this. So the website again is www.buyblackett.com/ANIMISTIC. Buy Blackett. Funny mugs, unique vibes, and you're supporting your favorite podcast.
What do your classes look like? Are they all online, in person? Are you using Duolingo or any sort of learning apps or things to help within your program?
Not Duolingo. I like Duolingo for if you want to, start learning some basic stuff, but No, my classes, I designed them all myself. I mean, the dairy was literally boots on the ground, with that. And so the Spanish courses are all online right now. I would love to, and I've been approached by a couple businesses to like think this out, feel this out, of coming in person and doing some on-site lessons. Spanish is actually a really easy language to learn. It's very phonetic, which means you spell it the way you hear it, unlike English.
Right.
So the Spanish one it's all online right now, which is great for a lot of people, right? Because a lot of people don't have time to travel to a class, and that's why it's online.
Mm-hmm.
It is total 14 weeks, but don't let that scare you. It's 8 weeks of live but recorded classes. If you can attend live, cool. If you can't, that's fine too. I record every class, and then it's posted within an hour of class. So I have a lot of students. The majority of my students actually take it via recordings. And the beauty about that is you're watching a recorded live version. So it's still engaging. You're still hearing the students ask questions. We have great camaraderie and conversation about different things that people, like my students, bring their own experiences, and I love it. So it is 8 weeks, and it's Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 1 hour each. So 2 hours per week. So you're getting 16 1-hour classes to watch. You get the additional 6 weeks to catch up on things, right? So maybe you fell off the wagon, maybe because this happens every time. You're taking the class and week 3, week 4 comes along and you fall off the wagon. Something happens, right? Maybe you're traveling a lot for work. Something happens with the family. You can still jump in and still complete the course by the end of the time. So for example, this course started September 19th. My students have until December 28th to go back, pace yourselves, go back and rewatch videos. I'm also available to my students the entire time. So I answer a lot of student questions. If you can't attend live, shoot me an email. If you shoot me a laundry list, I'll be like, let's jump on a Zoom call so we can, better do that. Behind me is my smartboard. I love this thing. It allows, so I guess to answer your question about a tool, this thing is awesome. It's my whiteboard. It's, I can bring a lot of stuff up on it to help students learn. So Spanish right now is all online. English as a second language is in person, because I have found that Spanish speakers are more willing to learn English when they have that connection with the instructor. And I think that's important too. So right now I do teach that in person. I do, and again, they're all adults. They are here on TN visas. And the current adults that I teach ESL to on Wednesdays currently work at a swine operation. And I'm starting another one here. It's actually outside of Philadelphia in a couple of weeks. So that's at a horse racetrack, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So my goal with that is let's meet in person. And then if you want to continue to learn English, I'm working on an online program for that too. Because I can't be everywhere all the time. I wish I could be, but that's obviously just not the reality. So yeah, I'm open to doing online and in person for both Spanish and English. And it's just whatever opportunities come down the pike.
Oh, that's awesome. I know I studied abroad in Costa Rica for a summer during college, and we got the opportunity to live with a Spanish-speaking family for a handful of days. And I took Spanish in high school, but never in college. And so I could kind of understand it a little bit. But what was so interesting to me is the just in the agricultural space, the English words for things in agriculture translated to Spanish are actually like pretty similar. At least I was able to understand more with the Spanish speaking father that we were living with at their dairy farm than I was in their house.
Yeah, that happens. And that's because, see, this is why I say Spanish is easy. And when I give presentations, I get the audience involved. So what you're talking about is actually, we call them cognates, right? So they're words that sound very similar and also mean the same thing. So things like electrolitos, right? Sounds like
Electrolytes.
Tanque is tank, right? So there are a lot of those things. So I always start class off with, so I'm like, look at you guys already know some Spanish, So, and it's my classes, we're putting those words together and I got so excited last night. So I'm such a grammar nerd. And I see my students laughing at me on camera. And I'm like, guys, we just finished last night was week 3. And we're putting simple sentences together, like just simple ones right now. The filters are dirty. That's a sentence. Now they're able to do that. Like, it's the little things that just make me happy, because it really, my students, the best part about what I do is getting their feedback. And I get it unsolicited all the time. And I love it, because they're like, hey, I was out sorting cows with Juan, and he was so excited that I was saying the cow numbers in Spanish. And we just had this great conversation. Might be broken Spanish, might be broken English, but you're still having a conversation. You're making inroads, whether you know it or not, establishing relationships with other people.
How have you seen the camaraderie and positivity within a specific operation that you've worked with, and when you're able to merge, the English speaking managers with the Spanish speaking employees, and how has the culture changed, and how have you seen that change given the communication barrier going away?
One of my favorite stories that I share with people, so if people have listened to me speak before, they probably heard this story, but it's so worth repeating. A few years ago, I had a woman take my course. She was a milk tester in Wisconsin. And she was so excited, though she shot me an email before class. She was only in my course at this point, I think for 3 weeks, right? So we weren't even halfway through. She's like, Katie, can you get on Zoom early? I have to tell you something. I was like, okay. So this story it still gives me chills. She said, I've been milk testing at this large dairy. It was like a 5,000 cow dairy for years. And I would just go in and do my job. The milkers would do their job, and we would just go our separate ways. She said, but after 3 weeks of your class, I did because I always encourage my students, even after the first day when you're learning greetings, the next time you see a Spanish speaker, flip and say hola or buenos dias, right? Or ¿cómo estás? And you might not be prepared, because I also teach them how to say I am learning, because they're like, Katie, when I do that, they're like, oh, you know Spanish and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So I teach them how to mitigate that. But she said, I got to the farm and I said to myself, I'm going to actually use some Spanish. So she said, all I said was buenos dias, ¿cómo estás? And you should have seen their faces light up. And she said that entire shift. So, 5,000 cow dairy, she's at this shift for at least 7 hours. She said the entire time, she's like, I've never had so much fun testing milk, because they were teaching me Spanish. I was teaching them English. We had so much fun. It went by. Here's the kicker to the story, though. There was a blizzard that came through during this shift. And she said, I went out to load my milk samples into my car, and I had learned that the entire milking crew had cleaned my car off for me.
Aww.
And I was like, do you realize how much respect that you garner just in a matter of one shift?
Right.
So just you letting them know that you're putting the effort in to learn their language and to come together. I love that. And that's just one of many stories that I have heard from past students. And it's probably the best part of what I do.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm sure you have so many more.
I keep them in a Word doc because, like everybody else, I have, my down days or a down season. And sometimes I have to remind myself that, no, Katie, keep going, because what
this is your why.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes I just need to be reminded of it.
Oh, that's awesome. I love to hear stuff like that. And I know sometimes we hear comments, and maybe it's the resources aren't available or whatnot, but you'll hear, and I'm sure you've heard it before, that, well, if they're coming to the US, that they need to learn English. How do you respond to people that are making those comments?
Oh, I hate that comment, because obviously of the connotation behind it.
Right.
Especially if they're working with Spanish speakers or they are an employer of Spanish speakers. My first question to them is, how's that working out for you? How is that attitude helping you?
Right.
Because there are things that you could be doing to bridge that gap. And furthermore, they're here, you hired them. They are here to help us produce agriculture, because as Americans, and I have been on the HR side of it, I have been a farm owner where I have interviewed 60 people for a milking position. Only 2 were hired, and both of those couldn't even last 24 hours. So I get it, but if you're employing Spanish speakers, the least you can do is meet them halfway. In my opinion, there should be onus on both parts.
Oh, for sure.
So when people come at me with that comment, I often say that, but I often also say, what's wrong with meeting in the middle? I am not, the services that I offer in both Spanish and English, I'm not asking either person, an English speaker or a Spanish speaker, to become fluent. Most of the time, that's unrealistic. All I'm asking is for you to learn a little bit of each language. Also, if you're an employer and you're going to say that, then put up the funds and the time to help your employees learn English. Because that's what I run into a lot. That's actually a very big roadblock, if you will. You want them to learn English so bad, well, then help them. Because I'm not saying that you should just pay for that fully, but if we're willing to offer professional development and trainings for Americans, why can't we offer that same thing for the Hispanic community that is here, again, to help produce food in the United States?
Yeah, and that's my biggest thing is like there's so many, I mean, and I know that this probably happened before COVID too, but there's still so many signs everywhere that saying hiring, we're looking for people. But I don't know if it's our generation or what, but farm kids are not raised. There's not as many farm kids as there was today, as there was 20, 30 years ago, and nobody wants to do the hard work. Mm-hmm. And so we've had to rely on other ethnicities to help us still produce the food that we need to today. And every single operation that I've ever been on, dairy, swine, poultry, whatever, they're the hardest working people I know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think people would be shocked to find out that 78% of the agricultural workforce here in the U.S. speak Spanish. 78%, that's almost 80%. Like, how can you just ignore that statistic? Insane. We also have the second largest Spanish speaking population in the world. So when people really want to get into it with me about learning English, I tell them to Google what the official language is in the US, and you will find we do not have one. We just don't. We're a country built on colonization. Any other country, like you type in what is the official language of Honduras, it's going to tell you Spanish. What is the official language of France? French.
Right.
US, we don't have one. Is it the most popular language spoken here? Yes. But Spanish is actually the second largest language spoken here. And there was a stat that I saw somewhere, which I didn't make note of it to jot it down, but the amount of people that are going to be bilingual by like 2050 is pretty darn high. And if you don't want to get left behind, highly recommend learning some other language.
Catch up.
Yeah. Another one that actually just came out a few years ago. So the U.S. population grew in a time span of 11 years. Okay, so just over a decade. So they grew from 2010 to 2022 by 24.5 million. Okay, 24.5 million people within a decade. We'll just round it and say decade. 53% of that growth were Hispanics.
I believe it.
Yeah. And whether you agree that they're here or not, I don't get into the political arena about that. What I'm most focused on is agriculture in the U.S. I have, again, been on the HR side trying to hire Americans, and it's a struggle. And unfortunately, it's not going to get any better. Right. I have been part of lobbying groups to help, lobby for different worker visa programs because, dairy doesn't have the same opportunities with that as, say, poultry or swine, or especially produce. Produce industry, I'm not saying the H2A or H2B program is perfect, but at least they have that option. Dairy doesn't have that option.
Yeah, I know I'm working more in the swine space now, but a lot of the producers that we're working with are working with employees on the TN70 program, which I think is very similar on the dairy side as well.
Yeah. So my current students that are taking the ESL, the English as a second language, they're all adults, and they're actually all so they're the ones that are working on a swine operation. and they're all from different parts of Mexico, which is a lot of fun because I feel like I tell them every Wednesday, I'm like, I feel like I learn as much from you guys as you learned from me. And I have to tell you, I love their employer's attitude. When he first contacted me 2 years ago, he was obviously looking for, I'm certified, by the way, in English as a second language. You have to do a whole practicum and everything. And my first students, by the way, were from China and Saudi Arabia. So that was challenging. But anyway, when I talked to this employer, I said, okay, so what would you like me to teach them? Like, pig anatomy, because I do all of the anatomies in each one of those courses. And I'll never forget his response because he said, well, I mean, yeah, I guess. I was like, what? Like, you get it? And I was like, I can use my ag curriculum that I use in Spanish to teach English. And he goes, I want you to teach them what they want to learn because I want them to be happy here. And I was like, so things like, and this is what matters to them, how to set up a bank account, how to read the road signs here, right? Like none of them are in Spanish.
Right.
How to go shopping. This is a heartbreaking story for me. Let me hold on. I'll get into that in just a minute. So what I'm getting at is this employer's attitude. I wish more people shared because he knows that his business would not be able to function the way it does right now without them. So he's like, I want them to learn what they want to learn in order for them to be happy here. So I went in one day. I always have lessons planned, but I always ask them, hey, if there's anything specific you want to learn, let me know. And we were talking about, so the first 10 minutes I get to talk all in Spanish because I obviously take the opportunity to practice it.
Right.
And I was like, hey, what'd you guys do this weekend? And they're telling me that they went to Target. I was like, oh, how'd you like Target? And they said, well, we went to buy clothes because, mind you, a lot of these people come here for like a 3-year contract. Usually it's 3 year. They come with a suitcase. Really so much. No. So they're like, we needed clothes. So we went to Target. And I was like, oh, so what'd you get? And they're like, nothing. I was like, oh, did you not like the clothes at Target? And they go, no, we didn't know how to say, can we try these on?
It's things that we take for granted every day.
Exactly. So that class, we went over articles of clothing and we role played. So I was a dressing room attendant. So they had to practice, can I try these on? I need a different size, things like that, things that we don't think about. So the next time you want to say they're here, they need to learn English, maybe take a step back and put yourself in their shoes because the majority of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but the majority of them do want to learn English. And I'm trying to forge a pathway for that to happen that is efficient and practical for everyone involved.
Yeah, I love that. I'm kind of switching gears here a little bit. But I know you travel quite a bit, or you at least try to. Where has been one of your favorite places to travel to? And if you haven't been somewhere, where's your next goal of a place that you'd like to go?
I do love to travel. And it's funny, everybody that I meet, their first question is, so where are you going next? I'm like, do we really travel that much? I love traveling. It opens up a whole new world and a whole new perspective. I wish more people would do it, to be honest. To ask what my favorite place is, I feel like that's asking a parent, who's your favorite kid?
Who's your favorite child?
Because it really, I have different ones for different things, right? So if I really had to pick, I loved Panama. There's a dairy farm, obviously. Like every country I go to, I have to visit a farm. And the dairy in Panama was crazy. Like the cows were just housed in these tents, and it was awesome. You can do that in Panama. And the place I was in was called Boquete, which is the mountainous region, and it's 70 degrees there all year round. It is absolutely gorgeous. So maybe for Spanish speak, I don't know. I like Mexico, but Morocco was freaking awesome. I was just in Greece so that was a sister trip. And I have to tell you, I did not expect to use my Spanish as much as I did in Greece. Wow. and maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. The US, we are one of the very few countries that are monolingual, meaning we only speak one language. Many other people speak at least two, if not more. I met this guy, he spoke five languages.
Wow.
And he was so excited that I could speak Spanish. So we just had an entire conversation in Spanish. It was like his third language. And I met so many great people because I spoke Spanish. So it was awesome. So to answer your question on where I want to go, I do have a goal to go to a different Spanish speaking country every year. That is for my business. So I can write it off, but it's for me to improve my Spanish, to continue. I'm always learning. I'm never going to tell you my Spanish is perfect. I actually hate being called fluent, believe it or not. Like I could live in a Spanish speaking country tomorrow, but I'm like, oh no, there's so many dialects. There's so many slang terms, The most rewarding part, by the way, is the people. I have connections now, like all over, which is awesome. But so for 2025, I would love to go to Argentina.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And that's because everybody I meet internationally, I kid you not, everybody thinks I'm from Argentina.
Really?
Yes.
Maybe you have the Argentinian Spanish dialect?
I do. That's what I've been told, because I've literally asked legit Argentinians. And it was funny, the latest one, other than Greece, everybody in Greece thought I was from Argentina. And I'll get to why in a minute. But I think one of the most shocking was I was on a call with a company, and their HR person was Argentinian. And she's like, hey, Katie, can I, listen to your Spanish? Can you say something in Spanish? So I did. She didn't miss a beat. She's like, so what part of Argentina are you originally from? And I'm like, I called my mom right after, because I was like, we need to talk. So I've always joked that I was adopted. And she was like, Katie, you're the only girl born the day that you were born. I'm like, I don't think I buy this. So I've been told that I have an Argentinian accent, that I look Argentinian. And this is fun. So I'm a history nerd. And when I was in a rabbit hole, I was in a World War II rabbit hole for a while, kind of still there. When I learned, so both of both my mom and dad's side of the family, very German. But when I started learning that after World War II, a lot of Germans escaped to Chile or Argentina to escape the war crime trials, there's a lot of German ancestry there. So maybe that's where I come from, because I get told it's my dark hair, my dark eyes, and my fair skin. And I just never knew that. I never, put it together. So I joke that I'm going to go to Argentina and find my real family. My family here doesn't find that funny, but I think it's hilarious.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, that's so cool. Just one last question for anyone who is looking to start learning Spanish or trying to better communicate with their employees. What is the best way for them to contact you or to possibly take one of your classes?
So go to my website, agvocate.com. That's AGVOKATE. Do you see what I did there? Advocating for agriculture.
Yep.
It takes some people some time. It's fine. But that is a wealth of information. I just overhauled the Spanish for Agriculture page. I have a wait list for the winter class. I always have wait lists. So get on that as soon as you can, because you'll be the first one to learn when registration is open. So shoot me an email, get on that wait list. If you are interested in the ESL option for Hispanics, also just shoot me an email, see what we can do there. I would love to have you. I love what I do. If you can't tell, I don't know if that's, evident through what I've talked about, but it's a lot of fun. I don't really do a lot of things that aren't fun. So I make these courses as fun as possible. And I think that people will be pleasantly surprised with the impact that they then can make with just learning how to say a few things in Spanish. Like, again, you're not going to be fluent.
Ripple effect.
Yes. Yeah. And, Duolingo, I always get asked that question. It's great if you want to learn touristy stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to give you the agricultural terminology that my courses do. And my two T's, the people that I tutor on the side, the one, actually the 75-year-old, what he does is he takes screenshots of the errors that he gets in Duolingo, and we go over them as the learning tool. And I have to tell you, almost half of them he's correct on. But we have to remember that Duolingo is AI. And if we're not going to specify things like, I want the formal versus the informal and then mark it wrong, like, I don't like that as an educator, because I'm like, you're shooting people's confidence when technically you were correct, but you, AI, didn't specify what you wanted. Or they use more Spain Spanish. I don't teach Spain Spanish. I have yet to encounter anybody in the U.S. agriculture industry from Spain. They're all from Latin America. So that's the Spanish that I teach in these courses.
Mm-hmm.
Duolingo is more of the Spain. If you're headed to Spain, totally recommend Duolingo.
Awesome. Good to know. Well, we always like to leave our audience with an action item. And I think if they haven't picked up on the action item yet, it would be that if you don't know Spanish or are not learning a second language, soon you should. You should start learning.
It's a lot of fun. Don't get over it. Get over the attitude of, my language is superior, my culture is superior. That only hinders yourself in so many ways. Just open up your mind a little bit. I'm sure you will be pleasantly surprised with what will happen once you do that.
Oh, well, I really enjoyed this conversation, and it's been a pleasure having you on Coffee in the Barn this week.
Thanks for having me so much. I enjoyed this.
Awesome. Thank you.